is dead wrong in almost everything. It's just wrong. And the proof is in the pudding. They got it wrong. The guys who are running the show is what I call the Wall Street Washington financial complex. Okay, it's a revolving door between the big banks, the Goldmans, the J.P. Morgan, Citi, Lehman Brothers went down, and academia, Harvard, MIT, primarily Princeton, and government. There's a revolving door of these people that go in and out between these things. Larry Summers is my favorite poster boy of this. He was hired by Obama post-crash to help save things. Well, he was chief financial advisor to Clinton. Then he went to a big hedge fund. They paid him $5 million a year to basically go meet and greet people. What did he know? And then he goes back to Harvard, where he was president of Harvard, famously got fired because of some controversy at the time. But he's just typical. In and out of government, and they all believe the same things. It's basically kind of neoclassical, neo-Keynesian ideas. And they're all wrong. So, why is that? What are the ideas that Austrian theory has that is so good at predicting what happens? Well, here's what happened in the biggest financial crisis of my lifetime, and your lifetime. I've been around maybe a little more than most of you. The biggest thing since the Great Depression. Maybe even bigger in some respects because of its scope, its worldwide scope. Europe is still experiencing the fallout of this. Spain is Greece. That's all you hear about. It's all housing. It's all bad investments related to housing. Everybody was doing it. So it's huge. So what happened? How would I, as an Austrian, look at things? Well, first thing I noticed, or you would notice, is that we go in these boom-bust cycles, and they seem to be getting more frequent with time. So the genesis of the 2008 crash happened in the last cycle, which was the dot-com boom and bust, dot-bomb. So what happened? Well, they blew up the money supply, distorted the economy. Every time these things happen, they're always caused generally by the Fed. Okay? That's where it comes from. That's because they pump in cheap money that destroys the market process of calculating investments in business. And there's always some asset class that it hits. But it's not greed. Greed is always existent in the market. It's a pejorative term for self-interest, but popularly known as greed. People want to make money. And when these things hit, these bubbles hit, they're, on the blogosphere, they're called the sheeple. People just go there. And then it was dot-com stocks. Everybody was into it. Everybody. Fortunes were made. A lot of them were made and lost. So what happened is that Alan Greenspan, the Fed inflated the money supply. The asset class at that time was tech stocks that blew the market up. Rational exuberance. They started raising interest rates. The Fed fund rate started to go up and the thing crashed. Well, then they panicked, as they always do. Interest rates go down. And interest rates go down because they flood the economy with money. cure the excesses of the dot-bomb crash, interest rates went down to almost 1%, Fed funds rate. Fed funds rate is the basic rate that the Fed charges banks to borrow money from it. They're the lender of last resort. That's where banks get their base capital, their base currency and everything's from the Fed. So, yeah, we got to revive the economy again. So, markets flooded with cash, basically. They print money, and they don't actually print it, but they create money out of thin air. It just there's a computer. They add some zeros onto the prime. There's 32 prime dealers that trade back and forth with the Fed. The Fed buys treasuries from them, and then credits their account with a bunch of zeros, with some ordinal digit in the front of it, a 1 or a 10 or whatever. So it's just created out of thin air. Boom. Now I have something that says I've got $50 billion or $50 million, and so they go out and they invest it. They lend it, they invest it, do a lot of things. Well, all this money comes in, further distorts markets. I'll get into that in a little bit, but distorts the process in which you and I and business people make rational business decisions. Because interest rates are a signal to us, which are basically completely screwed up when they do that. It sends the wrong signal. So everybody says, great, what's happening? And this time, it was housing. 89, it was commercial real estate, mostly apartments, the savings and loan crisis. Then it was dot-bomb. Then it was basically residential real estate. It was huge, just unbelievably huge. The Fed funds rate stayed down at 1% for two and a half years, I think. If I had my computer, I'd show it to you. But I don't. But anyway, so it went like from 5.5% down to 1%, stayed there until 06, from 01 to 06 basically, and then started creeping up again to almost 5%, lower 5%. So where did the money go? Where did the money go? Well, it blows up several ways. It's hard for the Fed to really create a huge amount of inflation or bad investments, create these bubbles just by printing money. Where it really happens is in the banks when they lend. And this is what you've probably heard of fractional reserve banking. I can basically lend out 90% of the money I have in deposits. Okay, I only need to keep 10% in the bank to cover demands for cash and whatever is in my bank. That's where the money creation really occurs. And when you have hundreds and hundreds and thousands of banks in this country all doing the same thing, and then all of a sudden they have all this free Fed cash that comes in that inflates their balance sheets, well, they can lend hugely. And that's what they did. So this time, you ask, why is this happening? I mean, you'd think, why does everybody make the same mistake at the same time? Businessmen and we homeowners, we all did the same thing at the same time. Why do we do that? Well, it's because of, we don't all have bad judgment at the same time. Something happens. And what that is Fed money. Fed money. Every time. Fed money. They create bubbles, booms and busts. Booms and busts. And we're still headed that way. Nothing has really changed. So there were three things that occurred during this period of time. One was the Fed, okay, well that's like throwing gasoline on the fire. you have all these guys in Wall Street, they've got their MBAs from Harvard, and they're just waiting to do something, and they heard about all the big bucks that have been made. Heard of all the big bucks that were made during the last cycle, during the dot-com bubble. Guys are in the street were making huge bucks underwriting these tech issues, as we found out that many of them were not, very sound. So what they figured out was several things. And this was the hand in hand with the government. They couldn't have done it without the laws that were in place that allowed them to make bad investments. They couldn't have done it. Because here's what happened. You've heard of subprime mortgages, all the whole subprime thing and what happened there. Literally, what happened was people with bad credit, and we're talking a Fair Isaac, experience score, whatever your credit score is, of just about 500. 500 for buying houses. Almost no down payment. Some were no down loans, some were 1%, 2% loans. And sometimes they were called liar loans. Do you remember that from the day, liar loans? Oh, well, I'm just going to tell you what I make. You don't really need to see my tax returns, do you? No, we'll do it. And so why would any lender in their right mind lend to somebody like that? Why would they do that? Well, they wouldn't if they're in their right mind, but guess what? They had a guarantor of all those loans, Fannie and Freddie, and to a lesser extent, so FHA and there's a whole slew of agencies with acronyms, that were behind this whole thing. But basically, it was Fannie and Freddie. They were half of the mortgage market in the entire country. They underwrote half of the loans. $5 trillion. I mean, it's a huge number. I mean, $1 billion is a lot. We have no concept of a trillion. It's $5 trillion. They guaranteed. And you know what? You had all these mortgage brokers who basically were divorced from the responsibility subsequent to the underwriting, the writing the loan, because they sold them all off. They sold every loan off to Fannie and Freddie. And what did Fannie and Freddie do? They packaged them up. They called residential mortgage-backed securities, or MBS. And they sold them to Wall Street. And then Wall Street packaged their own mortgage-backed securities. Huge numbers of these things. They set up these big trusts, and they pooled maybe 6,000 mortgages into one deal. And there may be $2 billion of mortgages wrapped in one trust. And they were really clever. They were really organized and done well by these smart kids on Wall Street. Brilliant kids. I mean, they were geographically diverse. They were economically diverse in terms of risk, from the 500 credit score guy to the 750 credit score. Prime loans down to the subprime loans. All packaged up, and they're pretty clever. Actually, they're still doing it. And if they failed, the bottom guy who they sold them off in what they call tranches. They sliced them up, and the A tranche is up on top here, and everything was subordinate to him. So he got maybe a 4% return. The guy down here may have got a 10, 12% return. A lot of risk down here, because if these things start defaulting, the bottom guy gets cut off first. Then if more default, the next guy. There's maybe 9 or 10 tranches in there. Interestingly, a lot of them are still surviving, have still survived. But the bottom guys, a lot of them got wiped out. Just totally wiped out. If you're in the top tranche, you're still in pretty good shape. So, the money creates a frenzy. Okay, there was so much money being made in fees from your local underwriter here, from the local mortgage broker. It's getting huge, big bucks. People are making big bucks locally. Up to the guys on Wall Street who are selling these things off to pension trusts. The Norwegian teachers' pension fund was buying subprime tranches. All over the world they were selling these things. Huge. And the basic premise is what? Ready? Got a guess? What was their basic premise? Housing has never gone down in any given year on a national basis. Yeah, we had dips, but not actually decline. So don't worry. Does anybody ever read The Black Swan by Nassim Taleb? Anybody know what that is? My favorite philosopher. Really great guy, a fabulous book. And what he basically said, all the risk models that were used in Wall Street were all wrong. Well, duh. It's obvious. It's pretty obvious after it all happened. They're all wrong. All the risk models were made by famous guys. Merton Scholes, Black Merton Scholes, that had a famous methodology for measuring risk. CAPM. I don't know, it was about 3. They were all wrong. These guys and these MBA guys were underwriting these things, and they said, "Look, we ran this study and that test, and and you know what else we're going to do? Not only were their risk models wrong, we're going to buy insurance. Yeah, we got insurance on these things. So how could we go wrong? Not only we got this underwriting done perfectly, we've got our risk models figured out. We're going to get insurance. Guess who insured you? AIG. Anybody? AIG went belly up. That had, maybe they don't know how much, but it was $80 billion maybe of liabilities that they had as a result of these things. Anybody read The Big Short? Fascinating book, actually. I don't agree on the premise, but he documents kind of what happened. They were actually, you would think this would be an investment like a bond, it's a real asset, it's paying off something, it's not speculative in the sense like an equity where you're waiting for the stock to go up if the company, it's secured by an asset. It's like a bond. That's an investment. Well, they started doing what are called synthetic subprime mortgages. And there wasn't really anything there. What they were doing is they were betting on Washington Mutual Fund number 2003-100. That pool, and they were betting that pool of investments would do, and a certain tranche in that thing would do X, Y, and Z. It would go up or down or yield, whatever. Synthetic. Synthetic means it was just a notational amount. It was just created out of thin air. There was no there. It was betting on, it's like futures in the market or anything that bets on the market without actually owning something. That's all it was. Synthetic. So there's no there. And they still haven't figured out how many billions there were in those. The Big Short was all about that. And it's a fascinating story how this guy Paulson made a killing. He saw it coming. And he apparently suckered Goldman into structuring this deal. Every buyer has got to be a seller. Every seller has to be a buyer.